Everything looks different through this. Same room, same light, same camera, but something shifted. There's a line from 13th century Persian poem Rumi's Masnavi that I have been thinking about for weeks. It goes, "You held a blue glass before your eye. For that reason, the world seemed blue to you." One sentence, but what is pointing at is something most of us move through every day without noticing, that we are almost never seeing things as they are. We are seeing them through whatever we happen to be carrying. And the question I want to sit with today isn't whether that's true. I think we already know it is. The real question, the harder one, is how do you tell the difference between a distorted lens and an actual one? Because that distinction is so important. Recognition. You have had this experience, you wake up already off, bad sleep, something unresolved, and suddenly everything is evidence. A friend's text reads as cold, a meeting at work feels pointless. The person in front of you at coffee shop is the most irritating human life. Nothing dramatically changed. The world is more or less as yesterday, but you're holding a different glass. The flip side is just as real. You get good news, or you finally sleep, or you have had one honest conversation that leaves you feeling seen. And the exact same life looks different. Same job, same apartment, same commute. Something shifted, and you feel it immediately. Most of us know this in theory. What is harder is catching it live, and harder still knowing what to do with it. The main idea comes from a longer story in the Masnavi. A lion is tricked by a hare into looking down a well. He sees his own reflection in the water and mistakes it for an enemy. He jumps in. What Rumi draws out of it is this: our inner states act like a filter over everything we perceive. The world doesn't come to us neutrally, it comes through us. Psychologists have been studying versions of this for decades. There's a concept called cognitive appraisal, the idea that what we feel isn't triggered by events themselves, but by how we interpret them. Two people in the exact same situation can have completely different emotional experiences. There's also research on mood congruent memory. When you're anxious or low, your brain is literally better at recalling negative events and filters actively for evidence that confirms how you already feel. The blue glass isn't just a metaphor, it's a reasonably accurate description of how the mind functions, the part that usually gets skipped. Here is where I want to slow down, because this idea that your perception is filtered by your inner state is genuinely useful, but it also has a shadow side that I think is worth being careful about. If you take it too far in one direction, you end up with something that sounds like wisdom but functions like gaslighting. The logic goes, you're feeling bad, so maybe that's just your lens. Maybe it's not really that bad. Maybe you need to work on your mindset. And that can cause real harm, because sometimes your perception is accurate. Sometimes the discomfort you're feeling is your nervous system doing exactly what it's supposed to do, picking up on something that genuinely needs attention, a relationship that's draining you, a situation that isn't safe. Those things don't stop being real because someone reminds you that perception is subjective. So the actual question isn't just, am I looking through a colored glass? It's a harder one. Is the color coming from me, or is it coming from what I'm looking at? And the honest answer is that there is no clean test for this, but there are a few things that help distinguish them. One is duration. A distorted lens tends to shift. Anxiety, exhaustion, a bad mood, they color everything temporarily and then lift. If you sleep, if you get some distance, if you talk it through, the read changes. But if you keep returning to the same feeling about the same situation across different moods and different days, that's usually not the lens anymore. That's the thing itself asking to be taken seriously. Another difference is specificity. Distorted perception tends to spread. Everything feels heavy, and the whole world is evidence. Accurate perception tends to be more precise. Not everything is wrong, but this specific thing is not okay. That specificity is worth paying attention to. The third difference, probably the most important, is whether the feeling is asking you to look away or to look closer. A lot of distorted thinking is avoidance. It tells a story that lets you off the hook, or cast you as the victim of everything, or make the world feel too dangerous to engage with. But genuine perception, even when it's uncomfortable, tends to point at something. It's directional, it warns you to do something with it, not just feel it. None of this is foolproof, but I think most of us have felt the difference somewhere in our bodies, even if we didn't have language for it. The feeling that something is off because I'm off, and the feeling that something is off because it is. How it shows up. Here is something concrete. You send a message to someone you care about and they take longer than usual to reply. If you're okay that day, you probably move on. But if you're already depleted, that same silence starts to mean something. You check twice, you wonder if you said something wrong. By the time they respond, you have already written and discarded a whole story that has nothing to do with them. The delay was real, the story was the glass. But here's the version of that same story that's different. The slow replies have been happening for months, not just when you're anxious, consistently. And every time you bring it up, it gets explained away. That's not the glass anymore, that's information. The skill, and the word skill, I use that loosely because I don't think it fully becomes a skill, I think it stays difficult, is in knowing which situation you're actually in. Personal reflection. I'm not on the other side of this. There are days where I'm well into a spiral before I even realize I started one. But what has genuinely helped is building a habit of pausing long enough to ask two questions. Not just what color is my glass right now, but also has this feeling shifted when my state shifted, or has it stayed? Because those two questions point in different directions. The first leads to self-regulation, getting grounded, getting rest, and getting some distance before you act. And the second leads to something harder, actually taking what you're feeling seriously enough to do something about it. I have had moments where I caught myself mid-conversation and thought, I'm too depleted for this to be fair right now. And I have had other moments where I kept telling myself I was overthinking something, looking for the distortion, trying to adjust my lens, where the thing I actually needed to do was trust what I was seeing and respond to it. Both kinds of mistakes are real, and in my experience, the self-help version of this conversation mostly warns you against one of them. Practical takeaway. So what does this actually look like? It starts with the same pause. When something lands hard or you find yourself building a case, just enough space to ask what I'm already carrying that might be shaping this. This is the part that usually gets dropped. You also ask, if I set that aside, does the feeling stay? If the feeling is tied to your state, it will soften when your state changes. If it's tied to the situation, it will still be there waiting when you come back to it, rested, clearer, with more distance. That's the difference between the lens and the landscape. And most of the work is just in learning to tell them apart. The lion jumped into the well because he was completely certain of what he saw. He never stopped to wonder if the image in the water was his own. But the other failure, the one that the story doesn't name, would have been a lion who doubted everything he saw, who kept asking whether it was really a threat, whether his perception could be trusted, whether he was maybe just projecting. that lion would have been just as lost, just in a quieter way. Rumi's line has stayed with me because it doesn't ask you to stop seeing, it asks you to know what you're seeing through. It's not the same as telling you your perception is unreliable. It's asking for a kind of honesty that goes both directions. Honest enough to ask when the color is coming from you, and honest enough to trust yourself when it isn't. So here is what I keep sitting with. The last time you talked yourself out of a feeling, was that wisdom or was that the glass? I don't think there is a clean answer, but I think most of us already know which one it usually is for us, and that's probably where the work actually starts.